What's up, everyone? It's your host, Carlos Ponce, here again in episode 16 of season 2 of Advancio Talks. And we are live with Watson. And I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute. He's the founder of co-op called Vulk, but I'm not going to spoil the story. So thank you for joining us today, Watson. And before anything else, let me just tell you this. If you're just discovering us, welcome to the show. But if you've been here since the beginning, since 2022, well, you know what we are about. Advancio Talks is where we sit down with the people actually building the future of business and technology. Not just talking about it, but doing it. CTOs, founders, the folks actually making decisions that matter. So whether you're drinking coffee, commuting, or just curious about what's actually happening in tech, well, stick around. Watson has got stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else. So let's jump right in. Watson, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure as well. So, okay, let's start from the beginning, right? Predictably. So, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Watson? What's your story? How did you end up here?
Oh, it's a long story. I'll summarize. I've been in software for 30 plus years, actually. I started out, I first started programming when I was 12 years old. I joined the Marine Corps and I was a computer programmer in the Marine Corps. They don't have that occupational specialty anymore. But I started out on mainframes and what they called small systems at the time, Ada, uh, and a bunch of other Pascal, some C uh, back then. So this is 1992 or so.
Mm-hmm.
Then the internet came out. Lots of booms back then. Got out of the Marine Corps and went right into programming in the civilian sector. Bunch broad, the defense contracts have done insurance, medical devices, education, bunch of different fields. Then started getting into open source maybe around 2007. Start really felt very passionate about open source at the time until now. So trying to contribute in different ways. Fast forward, started working on or developed and founded a company um, called Vulk with a bunch of other people in town in Austin, Texas. We a bunch of us around town. We uh, saw ourselves over and over again at different consultancies and said, "Hey, let's get together, do something." And we said, "Hey, let's make it fair because we're getting together and we're basically helping someone else to retire. Let's get together and make it to where everybody who's a part of the entity, is going to be an owner." And
Mm-hmm.
so we formed it as a cooperative. It basically means everybody, you can look at it as a partnership where everybody who's a member is also an owner. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
is part of the decision making process. So that was about 14 years ago. And,
Mm-hmm.
we've been working in open source, very passionate about that. Um, and that brings us to, past 5 years. We've been doing a bunch of work with the Linux Foundation, Cloud Native Foundation, a bunch of different things, cloud native work. But we started specializing in writing an open source project that tests telecommunications software and equipment. And so that brings us to now. But we're very passionate about
Mm-hmm.
you know cooperatives, more people participating in the decision making process. So open source, developing open source communities, and decentralization and those types of things.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Can I ask you what inspired you to create like Volk as a co-op? rather than a traditional company structure?
Yeah. So, being in software, you see in the startup world and all this, you see, I mean, to be frank, you see a lot of exploitation. You see a lot of people working hard, 80-hour plus work weeks, and then end up not getting the payout. And you say, well, what's that about?
Mhm.
And you're like, well, let's go ahead and make some type of system like what lawyers do. When they get together, they don't have a traditional C Corp, they don't have a
Mhm.
traditional hierarchy system. They do a partnership. It's like such a coincidence that the people that know about the law,
Mhm.
they enter into a system that is where everybody is an owner. That's funny about that, right? So same thing, getting together and making it to where everybody who is participates as an owner. It's difficult, bringing people into that process, decision making process, slower, but it's more fair. So it's about fairness to answer the question.
Okay, okay. And I'm curious about, of course, we're going to be talking about a bunch of things regarding telecom and other topics, but I'm curious because we're still talking about the co-op as a business model. So I'm wondering how the cooperative model helps you attract and retain top tier cloud native talent.
Okay, so there's talent, cloud native talent, cooperatives. You'll find, and again, cloud native and open source overlaps. There's a lot of what's the cloud native, like Cloud Native Foundation. All the projects are all open source in that foundation. So there's a history there. Trying to attract talent within software, I'd argue within other places. Top tier talent is going to be, they're going to be people who, uh, they're going to be they're going to do the extra mile. They're not really 9 to 5ers. They don't really stop at
Mhm.
5 o'clock in the afternoon. They're doing
Mhm.
other things. What are they doing? They're at meetup groups. They're at conferences at their own in their local cities on their own dime. They're networking with other people. They're what I would call tinkerers. That's the top tier. A lot of people don't want to really hear that. As far as within HR, I found uh, when it comes to getting top tier talent, they feel like they're good at that.
Mhm.
Sorry, guys, you're not good at it. If you want to be, you want to get the top tier talent, you want to be like, say, an NFL or NBA talent acquisition, you're going to have to go to where they are. And where are they? They're the people doing it on their own time. They're really the tinkers, and that's where you find them. So, open source, to answer your question, when you are inside of communities that share their their work and everyone can see it, everyone values it's a I'll use a term meritocracy. It's kind of fallen out of favor within the open source community, but people that show their work and everyone can judge it, that's who
Mhm.
they value. um People, what you'll find, you go to the, and I'll say this and I'll stop. If you go into the open source communities, for instance, you would think, if you're from outside of software, you would think, oh, Mark Zuckerberg is somebody that is a great programmer or something. No. If you go to the language that Facebook was originally made in, is PHP. I'm not part of that community, but I respect the community. But they're not like, hey, we need Mark Zuckerberg to write a book about how to program in PHP. No, that's not what they're doing. He's a great
Mhm.
business guy, but if you want top tier talent, you're going to places to where everyone can see that code. If they're writing a book, they would buy that book on the software. Everyone would be able to judge it. Those are the influencers within the space. That's who you go to get for top tier talent. And they, to add in, they respect and enjoy, or they find interesting, more fair models. So that's where the cooperative side,
Mhm.
where I talk about that type of thing.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much for elaborating on that part. Now, let's move on to the actual topic of today's conversation. Well, the theme, let's call it a theme. It's really not a topic, but a theme. because among other things, we're going to be talking about telecom, right? So today's theme is breaking through the telecom box, or breaking barriers through cooperative development. So that being said, I would like to ask you, what are the biggest talent gaps you're seeing in the telecom industry's cloud native transformation?
Okay, it's a good question. So when you're talking about cloud native, it's what I would call, it's what the cool kids are doing. Everybody wants to say, hey, we see Netflix or we see Amazon and we see how they're churning out new software or new services or new features every week, every day. How do we have how are they doing that? And then so the thing that people want to do, or they think that they want to do, is make their software so it's in the cloud. So it's like as you get closer and closer into these definitions of cloud native, microservices is a buzzword, immutable infrastructure, other things. They say, oh, well, that's what we want to do. Now, that's for software where it's, like e-commerce, other types of things where it would be like, very enterprise. Well, telecom, there's the people who purchase equipment,
Mhm.
and there's the people who make the equipment. The people who purchase the equipment, that's your Verizons and what we call Deutsche. The real name is Deutsche Telekom, but T-Mobile, these other, they are like, we want to be with the cool kids. We want to be in the cloud. We want those fast iterations. We want new features, all this stuff. We don't want things that take 6 months to roll out, a year to roll out. Why can't we have that? And so they force that and try to incise that on the people who make equipment. And the people
Mhm.
the equipment says, we can do that. We can do that. And so the gap is the getting the people who are making the equipment to come in and be with what I would call the cool kids, which is the cloud native um, community, which is really a big open source community. If that makes
Okay.
sense. Mhm.
Yeah, it certainly does. That raises another question. How do you identify engineers or developers who can think beyond traditional telecom silos, for example?
Hmm. That's another good question. I mean, of course, like I was saying before, the people that are showing up at the conferences, like
Mhm.
KubeCon, Kubernetes, and cloud are kind of almost synonymous, very much overlap. Um, pe- People that want to learn about these technologies, and there's a when you're not in the enterprise, large amounts of software, and you're in startups, that's going to be almost anything goes. You put your stuff in the cloud, you say, make it cloud native, but sometimes it's too expensive. You don't want to do that. But enterprise, which when you're integrating with other entities, other orgs, hundreds of orgs, well,
Mhm.
now you need to do something to where your interfaces and all these other things need to live in such a way to where they are interoperable, which is one of many components and trade-offs that you need to do. Now, these types of developers are going to have to show up in the places to where their main concern is interoperability, not, oh, I need something working tomorrow, and the only people I care about are these 5 developers that I'm working with. This is not developing for, an iPhone app or Android or something like that. This is going to be requires coordination with
Mhm.
maybe other companies, lots of it's telecom, lots of other companies. So you're forced into it. And
Mhm.
after you feel that pain, then you're like, okay, how do other people solve this problem? Then you're going to get into this space.
Okay. Okay. Watson, I was thinking that, and of course, this is very interesting. We're talking about the technicalities and the technology behind what you're doing at Vault and such. But there's another element, which is human, right? So we're talking about the people. A developer is essentially a human being, and all teams are comprised of human beings. And that being said, I'm curious as to what you think the secret is for a company that is like your case. That's a 100% remote company. What is the secret to building cohesive global teams or international teams, and how do you scale the teams while maintaining your cooperative culture?
Yeah, great question. The way for us, what did we do? And a lot of times bringing someone up to speed, it's kind of a little bit easier if someone's on autopilot. Someone's just great. Okay, maybe they can go off in a corner in the world and do something where you put out some specs and they can develop it, and it's not a big problem. That's normally not happening. People, in order to solve real world problems, oftentimes they need to be integrated in the team. How do we do that? We do a
Mhm.
lot of pair programming. We do a lot of pair, open up Zoom or whatever it is. We're sharing the screen and we are working on the problem together, two, two of us. And
Mhm.
whenever we bring someone on board, we may say 1 or 2 days out of the week, we're going to do that. Whatever tickets are written, that's it's going to be an assignment where two people are working on a thing, maybe more. And you're sharing the screen and all that. One person's driving, other people may be searching on how to solve this problem, whatever you're working on. That's one. Number two, your requirements. So, you know, bang your head against the wall and trying to create requirements, tickets, the work
Mhm.
that's supposed to be done. You could call it an artifact, a human artifact that other humans going to consume. How do you make something that other person can read it and then they're like, oh, I know exactly what needs to be done? The key, I would say, the magic and the cheat code for that, whatever way you write your requirements, whatever way you write your tickets, that it has to have acceptance criteria. When that acceptance criteria is finished, it's done. If it doesn't do what you wanted, too bad. You make a new ticket. However you describe it, that's your style. But the acceptance criteria, that's the little check boxes in there, whether you're using GitHub, if it's open source, you're probably using GitHub or what have
Mhm.
you. That acceptance criteria, that's the cheat code on how to communicate internally or even putting things out there for other people to contribute. And they get the credit. When it's done, it's done. And so that's really, when you hold yourself to um, that standard, it
Mhm.
makes it other people. You can have professional project managers develop the stuff and they'll have their skill set and all that. You can have other people who are like, something's broken, I'm going to make a ticket. You can have this explosion of tickets. It's like, no, did you put the acceptance criteria? You did. Okay, it stays in there. You didn't. Okay, we're deleting it. That will allow people to pick out, self-select, look at, oh, I think I'm good for this work. It isn't an assignment. We don't do assignment. We put the work out there and people can self-select and say, oh, I would be good at that. I want to work on that. And they self-select, and then you can do your pair programming from there. Those are all cheat codes for bringing people on board, working remote, all of these things.
You know, there's something else that I can't help but thinking that what you're describing is in a scenario that ideally it would be running a little bit smooth, like or on the smoother side. But what happens when that's not so? For example, challenges. What challenges do telecom companies, for example, face when transitioning to remote first development teams? Or they used to be in office, but now they're going to be remote first. What are the challenges that these companies face?
Um, so you said specifically telecom. So they are kind of in a way.
It could be telecom or it could be, some other space, but I'm just mentioning telecom because I think it's relevant. But let's say what challenges companies like tech
Yeah.
companies face when transitioning to remote first development teams?
So tech companies in general are closer to what you could call the cool kids. They're closer to remote. So it's not that foreign to them. They're faster. They have a higher standard for faster durations. If you are in a regular tech company, or if you're in a regular company that is working on software, just regular enterprise, and you say, yeah, it'll be done in 6 months, they're like, no, we're not accepting that. It needs to be faster now. If you are in something like a telecom or medical, they are historically used to 2-year long rollouts, 1-year long rollouts, and then 6-month rollouts. And so it's harder for them to work together on remote. And so that's where they're trying to come in. So that's where when you ask the question about telecom specifically,
Mhm.
what challenges do they have? And security is one. Like they have higher standards within, like telecom. They believe that they are very special because they are what they call mission critical. So if your phone goes down, they believe people can die because you can't call 911. So
Mhm.
they believe in themselves as being mission critical. So security is a very high component, all these other things. So they're very used to being what you could call old school 20 years ago style development. So being remote in there, they aren't as they don't lend their teams don't lend themselves as easily to, hey, we're gonna have a dispersed group. The ones that are in the open source community, which we're familiar with, they are, but they run into it's a lot of bureaucracy and how they accept change requests and all of these things like that. They have, some of them are still doing the waterfall method, where we analyzed it, we got the requirements, it comes from an RFP, and it's the features are going to be a year, 2 years down the road. So remote for them, trying to say the system that I said earlier, where it's like, hey, make the ticket, put the acceptance criteria, and then you're going to test it. It's really difficult for them to do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is great. How about trust? How do you build trust with major CSPs, for example, when proposing transformational changes?
So these service providers, again, from the open source side, when you're in some of these big conferences, you are contributing to the bigger projects. They're using those bigger projects in their software. They're also, so when you say service provider, they're the ones buying. They're the ones buying, say, the telecommunication equipment. They want to say, oh, you committed to Kubernetes, or you committed to this service mesh, or there's 100 different projects. We kind of, that's cool. We think, oh, the vendor's using that. Okay. Um, can you be a part of these groups as far as trying to get these features into what's downstream? I'm sorry, what's upstream from us in these projects, that we can increase some of the architectural decisions that we care about, more security, more interoperability, these types of things are the same within telecom that they care about. So these are big service providers, what their concerns are, which is much different than smaller.
Yeah, you mentioned Kubernetes, and I felt compelled to ask the question of how the demand for Kubernetes expertise, how is it reshaping, if applicable, from your perspective, how is it reshaping the telecom hiring strategies?
Yeah. So as far as Kubernetes and Telecom, Kubernetes again, it's oh, we're on Kubernetes, we're part of the cool kids. Uh, as far as performance wise, can you get it to behave in such a way to where it's up to telecommunications standards, security wise, performance wise? Again, um, uptime and all these things are things that people really care about. They
Mm-hmm.
actually put Kubernetes in the cell phone towers. It's in there,
Mm-hmm.
but why? Well, because of interoperability between the different vendors is the idea. They It ends up being a bunch of vendors. It ends up being kind of, this is where you get into the silo thing. A lot of them
Mm-hmm.
are like, hey, we need to test everything all together. We don't really want to pull in a bunch of different vendors. We're just going to pull in a small amount. How does Kubernetes help? The whole idea of microservices, so you have an interoperability layer, how they communicate, that you have some basis of communicating with between different organizations with vendors, where they can at least have a fair starting point in order to behave with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's not good enough, and they really want to rewrite maybe Kubernetes itself. And so people who are at what they call the platform layer, people who are developing on that layer, and they are very familiar with that, and they can give certain guarantees about performance there, they're going to be sought after, and they can showcase that at conferences or doing projects. They can do that for like telecom grade um, development, or within any of the things that are in the ecosystem, some of the software, all these other things that surround Kubernetes that make it easier to deploy. And then, of course, there's telecommunications directly, um, and they're going to be more closed source on that side.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Hey, listen. I mean, they say that when you're having a good time, time flies, and that this is no exception. We're approaching the final segment, the final minutes of today's conversation, and I don't want to end it without asking you what, from your perspective, what advice do you give companies struggling to find uh, good cloud native telecom specialists or cloud native specialists in general?
Yeah, cloud native companies, you want that talent. You can show up to the conferences, see who's actually giving talks, and who's in the crowd, the lightning talks. Who cares about those
Mm-hmm.
types of things? That's going to be top tier talent. The people who contribute, that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be all. That's your resume. Who all is doing that type of thing? And for whatever trade offs, architectural decisions that you want, those trade offs, those characteristics, who is it that cares about that? And see what they're contributing. That's really going to be the top tier talent. And
Mm-hmm.
who they recommend would probably be, you know, another tier of what you would
Right.
go after.
Right.
So yeah, but putting out a a blast to have resumes sent to you, probably not so much.
Okay. Gotcha. Definitely. Well, hey, Watson, really, it's been such a great pleasure and such interesting conversation by having you here. I definitely learned a lot, especially for those of us who are not engineers, but are always on the lookout and paying attention to what's going on out there. Uh, I don't want to end this conversation without asking you for some final words of wisdom for the audience. What is there anything? Anything? It can be anything. Feel free to close the conversation with any final words of wisdom from your end for our audience. What would it be?
Yeah. If you're on the more hands-on dev side, you want to get out there your local meetup groups. If there's something you're passionate about, you have an itch to scratch and you don't see it, you make one and you invite other people to come to that. That's how you grow. If you're looking for those types of people, you want to get into those groups. This is if you want top tier.
Mm-hmm.
This is if you want top tier talent or you want to be a part of communities that, this is what I would call the craftsman's view of software development or really any type of engineering. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would recommend, and I've always recommended that behavior.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Okay, how can people get hold of you? Are you on? I believe you're on LinkedIn, right? Right. That's the
Yeah.
best way to reach out. Let's
Hmm.
see, we got it right. It's folks. If you're watching and you want to reach out to Watson, you can do so on LinkedIn, which is right there down below. You see it scrolling by side to side. W-Watson. So that's on LinkedIn. And if you want to learn more about Vulk, of course, you can always go to the website, which is Vulk.coop, C-O-O-P. That being said, Watson, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. Please stay with me as we go off the air because I want to, before we go, I want to do a quick announcement. I want to make a quick announcement. I'm sorry. And this is about next week. Next week, right here on Advancio Talks, we're going to be having a conversation with Corey Strolabo, the founder, co-founder, and CEO of Deo. And I'm not going to spoil you with what the company is about and the story behind it, but the topic is going to be, I think, beyond interesting. It's going to be about mindful tech leadership, creating balance in our hyper-connected work world. That's right here on Advancio Talks next Wednesday, October the 8th at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So make sure you mark your calendars and join us here for a chat with Corey. And we'll have another awesome conversation, just like the one we had today with Watson. Watson, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the show. And see you next time. Stay with me as we go off the air. And the rest of you folks, see you next time.
Thanks.